This is the VIP Podcast, Virginia in Politics. Let's listen to host Chris Saxman explore the personalities and policies that connect the Commonwealth. The VIP Podcast is brought to you by the VCTA, Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free. The views and opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the VCTA and Virginia Free or our sponsors.
Welcome back to the VIP Podcast, brought to you by VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free. I'm the Executive Director of Virginia Free, Chris Saxman, had served 4 terms in the Virginia House of Delegates from 2002 to 2010. And along my journeys, I met this gentleman to my left, who ended up becoming a circuit court judge, correct, sir? And now is heading the Parole Board here in Virginia, Chad Dotson. Welcome.
Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, no, it's been a while. We actually talk. We usually do it through Twitter DMs or texting and whatnot. The VIP Podcast, Virginia in Politics, also very important people. So congratulations.
Oh, wow.
To being, it's official now.
Sit up a little straighter now.
I would hope so. I would hope so. Since you have the summers off, since you're a Cincinnati Reds fan.
That's right. Well,
didn't think I was going to work that in now, did you?
That's all right. You're a Pirates fan. You can't say much about.
I've had a lot of Augusts, which we lament greatly. But let's talk about your new role in the Parole Board. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, you know, I arrived at the same time that the administration came in last year and found an agency that had basically descended into a little bit of chaos. It was just.
Well, let's back it up. How big is the Parole Board agency? How many people are there?
Around 40 employees total.
Wow.
But what I found was almost 3/4 of those employees are part-time wage employees. It's just the agency had been an afterthought, really, unless it could be used for political purposes. It was really just an afterthought. It had been left sort of wither on the vine in the wake of 1995 with Truth in Sentencing and the quote-unquote.
Because they had nothing to do. There was no parole.
Right, supposedly, but and there wasn't for a while, but the numbers.
And there was.
And then there was. The numbers continue to grow. Obviously, in the last couple of years, the General Assembly has expanded who's eligible for parole a little bit, and our numbers that are eligible for geriatric release, which was created back in '95, those numbers are exploding at this point. 8 years ago, there were 295 geriatric eligible inmates. This year, there will be over 1,000, and they project it just to continue to.
Because they're aging
grow.
out.
They're aging out. Yes.
Okay, so 40 people in the Parole Board, abolition of parole, 1995. Not much going on there, but this is sort of the rise of the change as it occurs. People aren't paying attention to it. And then what did you find? What are you seeing?
Well, we found that, and obviously the Attorney General's done a very in-depth investigation, just found that policies and procedures were sometimes a hindrance to what prior leadership wanted to do. And it had been a while since there was leadership in the building that actually showed up to work every day because they were around the state. I'm there every day, and that was the biggest change that everyone saw immediately. They couldn't believe a chair was coming into the office, which surprised me. But
so you're chair of the Parole Board. How many people on the Parole Board?
There are 5 people on the Parole Board.
Okay.
At least 3 can be full-time, but right now we only have 2 full-time members, including me.
Paid?
Paid, yes.
Okay, they're paid.
And 3 part-time now.
Okay.
So 5 Parole Board members that make all the decisions on parole. We make recommendations to the governor on pardons.
Okay.
We have a group, an investigative group that does investigations for the governor on pardons. And I got a group of parole examiners that actually meet and interview the inmates prior to us taking up their case and discussing and voting.
When you're looking at parole, what are the parameters? I mean, I think probably the famous one is in Shawshank Redemption when Morgan. I mean, that people people take that as like this is how it works.
I hear that all the time.
See. I mean, like so because we don't know what really goes on. Right. So basically, what really goes on?
Well, I would like to get to the point where we can be more like Shawshank in only one way, which is that we're in the same room, even if it's a virtual room, with the parole eligible inmate and speaking with them. The board doesn't, unless we go out of our way to do it, and this board tries to go out of our way to do it, we don't actually speak to the inmate. We have a parole examiner that does that. And that's just not a good process for anyone. Not good for the inmate, obviously not good for us as we're trying to make these sort of solemn public safety decisions.
Yeah, I mean, this is also a human thing.
It is.
It should be humans, looking at someone in the eye and going,
right.
From a justice perspective, look the man or the woman in the face and say yes or no. I mean, be able to do that. That's
absolutely. We need to be looking victims in the face, listening to them, hearing what they say, and talking to them so they can see the process. And also, these are human beings that we're dealing with. And we have over 3,000 parole eligible inmates, and there's just functionally no way that 3 part-time board members and 2 full-time board members can meet with every one of them. So we are meeting with as many as we can. I actually have 2 board members today. They're going to one of the prisons to meet with 3 inmates in person that are up for consideration. We're trying to expand the ways that we actually meet with them because I want more information in front of our board before we make decisions, not less.
Well, and you were a circuit court judge.
Yes.
Explain your role or your. Were you circuit court? Were you general district beforehand? Juvenile district?
I was Commonwealth's attorney in Wise County and
attorney.
City of Norton,
Okay.
and then was appointed to the general district court bench and was there for
It's basically traffic court.
basically traffic court. Yeah.
Okay.
Second-year law student could do it. Then I was a circuit court judge and served 1 full
So
term.
you've been through the judicial system. You were a prosecutor, and then you general district, and then circuit court. So now you've seen in a relatively young age those elements, and now you're head of the parole board. What has been your experience in the effectiveness of the Virginia criminal justice system?
Well, I think that that's a big question. I think the Department of Corrections, by and large, does a good job in terms of rehabilitation for the people that are willing to work on themselves to rehabilitate. I think that I've been amazed at the number of people who were convicted as juveniles who really didn't get a first chance in many cases, and now they're asking for a second chance, who have really worked on themselves and really trying to do better and hoping to have a life someday. But I think that truth in sentencing in 1995 was, by and large, in my experience, a good thing as a prosecutor and as a judge. It gave juries, it gave judges, it gave lawyers clarity when sentencing decisions were made, and I think it's a good thing. It's a little different. I guess I come at this from a little different perspective because I didn't really think about parole until I got here. Had really not thought much about it.
Even as a prosecutor, even as a general district judge, even as a circuit court judge, you really didn't.
You don't deal with it. You don't see it.
Because it was abolished.
Because it was abolished. That's what everyone thinks, and because the agency was just sort of an afterthought, and you never really have to think about it. We do our case, and then they move on, and I don't. As a judge,
I think it's one of the reasons why this really hasn't really gripped people. And I have not read the Attorney General's report. Mm-hmm. No disrespect there, just kind of busy. It's just not like, oh, honey, excuse me, we're going to put the day on the
70-page report here. I'm going to
let's get this one over with. But I'm sure it's substantive and is obviously starting to make some penetration into the political market and raising awareness to parole. But as you said, it's been out of our minds for the last 25 years.
Well, and these decisions are just too important to be made in secret, and that's what's happened. And I hope that we can sort of open the process up a little bit. I would love to be able to get to a point, and we're working with, both parties are trying to work together in some sense here at the General Assembly, and hopefully next session we're going to really be able to swing for the fences. But to open up so we can have at least quasi-public hearings. The media could be there. People can see what we're doing because when we're voting in the shadows, then that's when you get the conspiracy theories, and they're turning me down because of this. And
you don't want that in the inmate population.
It's not good. It's not
good.
But
it's damaging.
It is.
Every day to get your head off that pillow and go, I don't have a chance, so what am I going to do here?
Exactly. And the human element from the inmate's perspective, but also from a safety perspective for our correctional officers, giving inmates something to work for helps protect safety within the institution, help maintain order, and it's the way we need to be doing things, and we're trying with our limited resources right now, but I hope we can open it up a little bit more. So
let's talk about the juvenile component first, because I had a case come up from my old district. Friends called, hey, this is going on, family member, kids doing the right thing. Right. Everyone agrees. The person in charge of DOC didn't see it that way. Yeah. And that's damaging. Because everyone in that facility where this young man is incarcerated, is a resident rather, they call them residents, will see that. Like, if that guy can't get out,
right?
How does that help?
Yeah. It's the juvenile population. Of course, in 2020, juveniles were made eligible if they were convicted as a juvenile and served at least 20 years of their sentence. They're eligible for parole, and that has been the most eye-opening thing for me was seeing this juvenile population. But you're right. Every decision we make sends a message, not just to that person.
Juvenile population. What are you seeing?
What I'm seeing are
we're seeing more and more violent crimes being committed by younger and younger people.
We are, and and it's part of the reason why I think we need to open it up is that not even in the majority of these cases, but there are a number of cases that really surprise me where you see this person and you're like, there's no way this person committed a crime. There's just no way this 42-year-old committed a crime. And then you look back when they were 16, and the only thing that the public remembers about this person is that 16-year-old in the courtroom. And so it's been really eye-opening to see the change that some of these people really worked for before they had any chance at parole.
Yeah.
And that's what's been compelling to me. I come from a background where I presided over a drug court for about 10 years and saw the power when you give somebody a chance, what that can do. Now, the majority of the people that come before us for parole just, I can't in good conscience lay my head on the pillow at night voting to release them. That's just the way it is, given what they've done and what they've done in the institutions, their behavior. But the juveniles who weren't ever going to be eligible before, now that we have to actually take a look at them, it's been surprising. I think a lot of people, society would be surprised at what you see with that juvenile population. They're the most interesting, compelling parole cases for me.
Why is that?
Just because, by and large, the people who went into the...
Are they the most rehabilitatable?
I think so. I think so, because so many of them, your brain's just not developed. You know?
Well, I mean, I look at pictures of myself back in high school or when I was in college, and I literally say to people, is this me?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I remember being here, but physically, is this me?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, that's you. And I'm like, I have no idea. It's so different from who I am physically.
Right, exactly.
It's like mentally and emotionally, psychologically.
It's a completely different person. I mean, and you'll talk to some of these people, and they are genuine. That I'm thankful that I got sent to DOC, because I was in a position with I'm a 16-year-old hanging around with 25-year-olds.
Right.
That's the only direction I've got. And so it forced me to grow up.
Right.
And so, again, I don't think people see that, and probably some people on my side of the aisle may not see it that way, but when you get to actually look at these cases and see them, it's compelling that these are human beings that could have a chance at a life. And so I think we have to take very seriously those questions. We're not granting parole in a lot of cases, but I'll tell you this, every time I hit that button to not grant, it's as difficult a decision for me as it is to grant, because that's someone's life that
You're feeling it.
yeah, I mean, we should. We should feel that.
Well, that's my whole point with the previous part of the conversation about being human in that element. Like, look, I look across that person right there, something just a camera here, a camera there. You're here to hear. It changes.
It does.
It changes, and it should, frankly. And so, do you think there's going to be an element to change the juvenile justice parole system or the rehabilitation system? Because taking these kids, ostensibly kids, 19, 20-year-old kids, and saying, "Oh, you're going to the general population now."
Yeah.
As a 14-year-old kid who might have committed a crime who didn't really know what he was doing, and if especially if they're poor and had no proper representation, which I'm sure you've seen in courtroom.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
You kind of go, what is there justice in here?
Well, we can't retry the cases. That's difficult, but
take it on face value. What this young person has done with their lives, he's on the right path. What do you do then?
Well, yeah, who are they now is a huge, huge component. It should be a huge component to what
Right.
we do. Now, obviously, what they did is going to be a part of it.
Sure.
But, just a couple months ago, spoke to a young man who was sent to Red Onion State Prison at age 15. I mean, I can't imagine.
What?
I can't imagine being at Red Onion
At 15?
at age 15.
Explain to the audience what Red Onion is and Wallens Ridge, and they're the top level of the DOC.
They are. That's the high security.
Supermax.
Yes. Well, Red Onion is I don't know if they still call it Supermax, but Red Onion is the only one now. They're originally both Red Onion and Wallens Ridge.
And there are 6 levels of
Yes.
DOC facilities,
Yes.
and that's a 6.
Yes, Red Onion is.
And one is like geriatric on the way out, work release.
Right.
So they step them on over time,
Yeah.
and they work them through the system. But Red Onion is a 6.
Yes.
And if you're 15 going into a 6,
Well, it's somebody that was forced to join a gang, had never been a gang member before, but was forced to join one in prison because that's the only way he felt like he could survive.
absolutely.
And, at age 20, he put all that behind him, once he was able to start thinking for himself a little bit. So,
But he survived Red Onion at the age of 15, 16.
he didn't survive, he thrived, got his GED, he's working on an associate's degree. I mean, yeah, it's every one of these decisions. I was talking to one of my board members just before I walked in here, and he always says that he's a longtime prosecutor. He's just sort of blown away by how difficult these decisions are if you do it right. And we're trying to.
When you start putting, again, the human component to this thing together, and because it has been abolished, it was out of our mind. We didn't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then when you start talking about these things, you're like, oh my gosh, this is harmful, dangerous, important work. And so the Attorney General's investigation on this, I don't know what you can and cannot talk about, but let's talk about the changes that you see coming in the parole system here in Virginia.
Well, when I first accepted the job, really I only had 2, I guess mandates is too strong a word maybe, but 2 directives from Governor Youngkin. First was follow the law, follow the policy and procedure. Pretty simple. And I think that's part of the reason why my name was in the mix, because as a judge, following the law is pretty important. The other was be open to second chances. And so those two principles sort of guided what we're doing.
That was his guiding principle to you.
Yes.
Follow the law, but be open to second chances.
Yes.
That's pretty strong.
It is. And he's granted a number of simple pardons. The Governor is very open to second chances for those who have earned them. And so what we've tried to do is the procedures manual at the Parole Board hadn't been updated since 1996. The policy
abolished, right?
Exactly. The policy manual had been updated in 2006, but not since then. So we did a full rewrite, and I hope today, I'm hoping that it's going to be approved, and we're going to have those on the website and out in the law libraries at the institution. So we just I had to know what the policies and procedures were so I could follow them. And so we identified a number of areas, and you see them in the Attorney General report where policy was just tossed to the side. So what we put into processes, for example, getting input from victims. In a number of cases, getting input from victims before making a decision was an afterthought. Prior boards would vote to grant parole and then go see what the victim thinks. Now, to their credit, some of them, they would come back around and change their vote later to not grant if they got input from a victim that swayed their opinion.
Right.
But it seemed out of order to me to be actually voting on a case before you had all the information. So we put in a process where we're meeting usually weekly. During the General Assembly session, that's been upended just a little bit. We try to meet weekly, no less than every other week as a full board. It's virtual, but and with our staff. And every case that has any chance whatsoever of being a grant decision, I have 5 sets of eyes looking at those to make sure that we've contacted the victims, to make sure that we've done everything we could to locate victims. Sometimes we can't locate victims. Some of these cases are 1973. I had a 1969 conviction that the guy's up for geriatric release now. Yeah. And so we put in some processes to make sure that there's no way a case is going to go out the door without us making every effort.
Because that was one of the arguments about the problem with parole, is that the victims weren't being contacted, or the victims' families weren't being contacted like this is happening.
Yes.
And that was under law that they were supposed to.
Yeah, you're supposed to give them an opportunity for input. And so that was the first thing we had to do, because that was what all the bad media last year, all the press was about, was victims not being contacted. So there's no way anyone will ever get granted parole under the Youngkin Parole Board without every effort being made to locate victims and to not just get their input, give them a chance to talk to us, but actually consider it. So we put that into place. We started requesting input from Commonwealth's attorneys before we make the decision. Now, sometimes that's not valuable, but often it is valuable to us, because we are making, I keep saying public safety decisions, but these public safety decisions, who knows better what public safety looks like in a locality than the Commonwealth's attorney and the law enforcement there. So, and we've been surprised that sometimes Commonwealth attorneys come back to us and say, you know what, I think he served enough time, or that was an excessive sentence, or wow, look what he's done since he's been in. By and large, Commonwealth attorneys have been very open-minded and given us genuine feedback rather than just I don't know, when I was a Commonwealth attorney, I might have just said, no, I don't want him here. He was making him serve his sentence. I would hope I wouldn't do that, but I might have. I was.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that. You said you were a young prosecutor. Long term, a lot of prosecutors are looking to run for other offices, and they don't want to be seen as weak on crime.
Right.
And that's a pull on the human psyche. Like, this is going to color my decision here. That I don't want this coming back at me.
And we do see a little bit of that sort of form responses, but mostly no. Mostly it's. Really? Thank you for asking my opinion, and here's my genuine opinion on it. And it's not, I see very little kind of trying to cover myself for the next election. I see them giving me the genuine opinion. Now, what the feedback they're giving us is not necessarily public right now, so they're because we want their genuine opinion. But
those are private conversations?
Well, they're in our system. They're placed in the file, but it's not a public file.
Okay, that part's not public.
Right.
Okay. I think it's important for them to understand, look, just tell us what you really think before it's public, and we can make better decisions here. And there's an important element of the public doesn't have to see every element of the decision-making process for good decisions to be made, and that demands a level of trust. And I think what you're trying to do right now is rebuild trust in the parole system. Is that fair?
Oh, that's my number one goal has been. I've said it 100 times over the last year. We have to rebuild the public's trust in this agency, because the public has no trust in this agency, and so. My whole goal in terms of trying to open it up and let people see, if people could see our hearings, they would understand so much more. Some of these things need to be
so maybe open up
private,
the public. The having those meetings public would show people that you're going above board and doing the right thing.
You know, we underwent a sort of a huge research project at the agency to determine what other parole boards did around the country.
Okay.
And we sat in virtually on parole hearings in other states. You know, some states have a hearing where the Commonwealth Attorney district attorney there, but by statute has to be invited to the hearing. And it's a virtual hearing where the people that are making the decision on the board have the inmate there. Victims are given an opportunity if they want to. They can provide input other ways, but if they want to come to that public hearing and make their statement, they can. Advocates for the offender can make the case. And it was eye-opening to me just to see the feedback that everyone in that room was able to get. The victim was able to see if the person had changed, and they hadn't in some of those cases we watched, but in some they had. The inmate was able to interact with the people who were actually making the decision, and the board was able to give them feedback as, all right, well, here's what you're not doing that you need to be doing in the coming years if you want us to change our mind on you. So it's just a much better system and fewer questions, I think, than when you keep everything hidden.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Talk about the decision-making process. You're on the parole board. You have the information. What does former prosecutor, judge, general district judge, circuit court judge Dotson look for?
Oh boy, that's
what's the? Yep, he's going to be okay. We can. Yes or no? What's the fork in the road for you?
There's no one thing I can say. There are so many things we look at. I mean, we do look at the seriousness of the crime. We have to, but that can't be our primary goal. We look at, have they been behaving in the institution? Because if they've been behaving, if they haven't been, how are they going to follow our rules when we put them out on the street? We think through, are there any conditions we could place on supervision on this person that would ensure that they're ensure public safety, but also that they're successful out there. We look at what programs they've completed. And we also look at what programs are available to them, because sometimes you don't have many programs, but if you're, you have a long sentence, sometimes you're on a waiting list and you can't get into certain programs. And we don't want to ping anybody for not doing a program. But we also may say, let's see if we can't get this guy into this program, because this is one that he needs to get out. We look at what the counselors within the institution say about them, the people that see them day to day, and we're trying to find better ways to get more of that information into the heads of the parole board. Again, a big thing for us on the juveniles is, what did they do before they were eligible for parole, when they thought they had no chance of being released? How did they behave? Were they trying to improve themselves? Because that's very compelling in terms of whether it's someone that's serious about changing who they were, or someone's just trying to impress a parole board.
Right.
We look at what the offenders say to our parole examiners. We get recommendations from our parole examiners that we take into consideration. And there's probably 100 other things that we look at in every case, just like in a court.
But is there a rhythm to this? Like, you kind of, after dealing with all these different people and the data and everything, what makes it happen? Is there a secret sauce that ends up coming out of this thing?
I can't really identify it if there is.
I mean, obviously, is just better behavior, improvement, person moving in the right direction. You want to encourage that, obviously. I
think just if you want to put sort of a 30,000 feet view, is just what's the story of who they were then versus who they are now?
Okay.
And how do they get there?
It always comes down to the stories, aren't it?
It does. And so it's we are implementing. I should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the juveniles. We are hopefully going to roll out by April 1 a sort of risk matrix for juveniles because we're required by code to treat them differently based on demonstrated maturity, and the lesser culpability of juvenile offenders based on the Supreme Court's rulings. And so we're going to have a more specific matrix that's hopefully going to allow us to provide better feedback. Yeah. Long term, I want to do the same thing with the adult offenders, more structured decision making, so that we're in a better position to say, here's what you're not doing, here's what you need to do. Right. And so it's a long-term process. I think it's going to take us 4 years, hopefully. But by the time we leave here, I really hope that we've substantially changed the way this looks for everyone in the system, all the stakeholders.
What's the similarity in the story on people who do break the law and are going into for a long period of time? What's the common element there that we as a society, and you would say to lawmakers, look, I do parole stuff, I see this all the time. If you had to go back and reconfigure their lives so that they wouldn't be making these mistakes and breaking the law and hurting other people, what would that be?
Well, that's the biggest question that we have in the public safety sphere, obviously.
I mean, that's what policymakers, I don't think, really talk about and focus on.
Well, this is my opinion based on, again, I've been all over the criminal justice system, and I've been a criminal procedure and constitutional law professor as well.
Okay.
So the family it's the family unit, the breakdown of the family unit. I mean, that's my policy opinion on it. The breakdown of the family unit is we have so many kids adrift. You know, speaking to
I mean, are they all coming from broken homes or fatherless homes?
not all, but
predominant.
Absolutely.
Like what percentage? 80% up?
I would say that. Yeah, again, I don't have those numbers, but it's in that neighborhood. Yeah.
But 80, 90%?
Yes, yeah. I met with a 14. She's not 14 anymore. She's 39 now, but she was 14, and her father, who was not a bad father, but they were divorced, and he was out of state, and so saw her.
Still a fatherless home.
Exactly, and the mother was having trouble with her, and the mother was having to work 2 jobs, and she did something completely out of character, and someone died because of it, and so she was convicted of second-degree murder. But she was 14, and again, I don't know that we're going to vote to release her. I just don't know. We haven't done that yet, but it's just so compelling to me to see someone who literally she was grasping for someone, some leadership, someone to show her the way, and she had no one.
The middle school is a horrible time for everybody.
A 14-year-old girl, I mean, right, can you imagine?
I mean, there's no sense of life at 13, 14, 15 years of age.
There's not.
I mean, we've had 4 kids. Those years, and I tell parents all the time, and I used to teach that level, I'm like, focus on the middle school. If you can get them through middle school and they're on a decent academic track, you're going to be okay.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. So,
but it's the family breakdown.
Well, that's what I see. I mean, it's just kids who are grasping for someone, and so they latch on to the 26-year-old or the 28-year-old that's in the neighborhood sometimes, or no one, or they have no one.
Well, they have to gravitate towards something.
Right. Yes. That's
human nature.
It is. We were 16-year-olds. You know how it is.
There's a great documentary. I think it's on Netflix still. Quincy Jones, and he grew up on I think the South Side of Chicago, and he basically said, I was either going to be in a gang until I found the piano, and what you see is what you repeat.
Yeah.
And I was raised around gangs, and my father, because my mother, she just had a psychotic break. My father Quincy Jones's father, took his family, the children, to Seattle. And I think he might have worked at the Boeing factory, whatever it was. And that's where he was able to get away from the craziness and the gang-related activities of Chicago. And there you have Quincy Jones, probably the greatest music producer of the 20th century. Otherwise, wouldn't have made it.
Right.
And how do you hold that against a 14-year-old kid when his environment is not determined by him?
Yeah, that's something we say all the time. It's not his fault. That may not be in a situation
where we can release him, but it's his responsibility.
It is.
And they have to grow up with that responsibility all of a sudden, because the justice system says, no.
Right.
This can't happen.
Yeah.
And that's where you draw the line. But that element of the fatherlessness is the predominant factor.
I think so. You mentioned gangs. Gangs are not something we see a lot in terms of gang activity and gang participation. That's not really something we see in many cases at all that are coming before us.
Really?
Yeah. It's a lot fewer than I would have expected, I guess. I don't know. I really didn't have any
As far as when the crime was committed?
Yeah.
Or in prison?
Well, both.
Really?
Yeah. It's rare that, and the DOC tracks very carefully gang membership, and it's very rare that anyone comes up before us that has that gang history, unless it's something like.
I think the general thought out there, if you ask anyone walking down the streets of these halls of the General Assembly building, do you think gangs exist in prison? They'd be, everyone's in a gang.
Well, it's not the parole eligible. That may be the case because the parole eligible population is small, so maybe they're not for a reason because they have a chance.
Or they just aged out of it.
Right. Well,
a lot grew out of it.
A lot of them, but we don't see that much at all. It's been really eye-opening to see and evaluate all these cases that for a lot of people have been forgotten, frankly. And again, I don't want to. I talk about public safety all the time. Every single one of these decisions, I'm serious about. If I put somebody out on the street, I have to be certain that they're going to succeed. We've got to put them in a situation they can succeed, but we have to be open to hearing the stories of those that have actually rehabilitated, have actually worked on themselves, and are different. And if we're not, what's the point in Department of Corrections? If we can't rehabilitate someone. So it's a tough job. Is
the correcting going on?
I think it is.
Okay. Is rehabilitation possible? Is it, the general population is going, look, I don't want to think about crime. I want to go about my daily business. When it does happen, are they being punished? But I think if you sat down with folks, at the end of the day, they'd say, look, I want the person to be better.
Yeah.
Even the victims' families would probably tell you, even as painful as this is, I would prefer that person to be a better person than not.
Sure. But it's easier to say, let's lock them up, and
Throw away the key.
Throw away the key, keep them there. That's the easy thing to do.
Get them out of my mind.
All right, yeah. The hard thing is to really evaluate, to actually try to rehabilitate them, which the Department of Corrections, I do believe does a pretty good job. They have the second lowest recidivism rate in the country. They have, they work pretty hard at rehabilitation. Some people can't be rehabilitated. They just can't, so those are the ones you have to keep away. But for the population,
out of those that come before you, you kind of go, look, this one is just not going to get the grade here.
There are a lot.
A percentage. What would you say?
I don't know that I can even put a percentage on that, and I don't know that I want to, because I got a group that needs some hope in order to get up every day.
Well, again, we go back to the Shawshank Redemption.
Right.
That's a lot of people's perspective, and a lot of quotes come out of there. Hope is a powerful thing, maybe the best of things.
That's right.
And we all need hope.
That's right.
And what's the common element though? Is this not changing for those who are just not going to make parole?
Yeah.
Or is it age? Do they age out of it for the most part?
I don't know. The geriatric population that we have now, when you talk about aging out of it, some have aged out, and so you can say.
But does age, is that a big factor? More time there?
It is a factor. It's absolutely a factor.
Yeah.
The problem is those that are in our geriatric population are largely those pre-95, and if they weren't released by the prior boards, there are reasons why. The crime was just so heinous. You commit 4 rapes. It's going to be difficult for me, even if the rapes were in 1981. It's going to be difficult for a civilian board, to wrap their brains around being able to release that person. Now we have to look past that to see what they've done since, but that's still an element. These are some of the worst, most violent crimes that are coming in front of us at this point.
Because then it gets real.
Exactly.
We talk about these. We talk about, hey, we want to help people out. It's easy to do, and then you go, oh,
exactly,
maybe not.
Exactly. And do I want my name on this person if they go out and commit another crime? And the ones that I vote to grant parole, I'm perfectly willing, because my votes have been public for years. I had to sign my name to every decision I made on the bench. Right. So I'm perfectly willing to take a chance on the ones we're taking a chance on, because I've done the due diligence. It's someone that's...
Does the parole board feel that sense of responsibility? I am held responsible because of that person's behavior now? I've signed off saying this person's going to be okay for society?
Yes. And actually, I meet individuals.
That's a huge responsibility.
It's a huge responsibility. I meet individually with every person that we grant parole to have that discussion. I said, you don't owe anything to me, but I'm telling you, if you want society to believe that people can be rehabilitated and that the people around you should get a second chance, your behavior is going to be a driving factor in that. Because if you go out and are successful, we'll celebrate that.
Sure.
And I said, if you go out and your name's back across my desk in 2 months because you violated a condition of your supervision, then, well, that's an argument against parole. So it's...
Have you had a situation where you've gone, oh, back you go?
Not yet. Okay. We have had some parolees that were released under previous boards. No one that we've released yet has violated their conditions.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. So we'll knock on wood there.
I'm sure you are.
But we're trying to do our due diligence to make sure that the ones we release not only are good bets, but also that we're putting them in a place with the support system to be able to succeed.
Everyone wants that.
You're a 16-year-old and you go out at age 46. You don't know how to open a bank account. You don't know how to shop for groceries.
Right.
You don't know how to pay your electric bill.
This is all before the iPhone, right?
Exactly.
Seriously. Let me tell you about apps.
Exactly. And that's what we talk about sometimes.
If it had been delivered, I wouldn't have,
That's the question I ask them. What are your biggest challenges? Let's talk through some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We release them. So.
All right. The Honorable Chad Dotson, thank you for your work on the parole board. I wish you the very best of luck. A new VIP here at the VIP podcast, Chad Dotson, the Honorable. This podcast is brought to you by VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free, of which I'm its executive director. Available to you on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for joining us.